Bravil, Part 1. Daughter of the Neben. Bravil was one of the most charming towns in Cyrodiil, sparkling in her simple beauty, illustrious by her past. No visit to the southern part of the imperial province is complete without a walk along Bravil's exciting river port, a talk with her friendly native children, and of course, in the tradition of the village, a whispered word to the famous statue of Lucky Old Lady. Many thousands of years before the arrival of the Atmorians, the native Ayleid people had long lived in the vicinity of modern-day Bravil. The Neben then, as now, provided food and transportation, and the village was even more populous than it is today. We are not certain why they called their region, as insular as they were. The word they used would be translated to simply mean home. The savage Ayleids were so firmly entrenched that the Bravil region was one of the very last areas to be liberated by the Lycians' army in the 2nd century of the First Era. Though little remains of that era culturally and archaeologically, thank Mera that the tales of deothery and depravity have entered into the realm of legends. How the Ayleids were able to survive such a long siege is debated by scholars to this day. All, however, grant the honor of victory to one of the Empress Alicia's centurions, a man called Tio Bravilius Tassus, the man whom the modern town is named. It was said he invaded the village no less than 4 times after heavy resistance, but each time, upon the morning dawning, all his soldiery within would be dead, murdered. By the time more century had arrived, the fortified town was repopulated with Ayleids. After the second successful invasion, secret underground tunnels were found and filled in. But once again came morning, the soldiers were again dead, and the citizens had returned. After the third successful siege, legions were posted outside of town, watching the roads and riverway for signs of attacks, but no one came. The next morning, the bodies of the invading soldiers were thrown from the parapets of the town walls. Tio Bravilius Tassus knew that the Ayleids must be hiding themselves somewhere in the town, waiting until nightfall, and then murdering the soldiers while they slept. The question was where. After the 4th invasion, he himself led the soldiers through the inspection of every quarter, every shadow. Just as they were ready to give up, the great centurion noticed 2 curious things. High in the sheer walls of town, beyond anyone's ability to climb, there were indentations, narrow platforms, and by the river just inside the town, he discovered a single footprint of someone clearly not wearing the imperial boot. The Ayleids, it seemed, had taken 2 routes to hide themselves. Some had levitated up the wall and hidden themselves high above, and the others had slipped into the river where they were able to breathe underwater. It was a relatively easy task once the strange elves, even stranger hiding holes, had been discovered to root them out, and see that they were no more midnight assassinations of the Empress troops. It may seem beyond belief that the entire community could be so skilled in these spells hundreds and hundreds of years before the Mages Guild was formed to teach the ways of magicka in the common folk. There does, however, appear to be evidence that just as Pacifics on the Isle of Arturium developed mysticism long before there was a name for it, and even more obscure Ayleids of southern Cyrodiil had developed what was to be known as the School of Alteration. It is not, after all, much of a stretch when one considers other Ayleids of the time of Bravil's conquering, and even later were shapeshifters. The community of pre-Bravil could not turn into beasts and monsters, but they could alter their bodies to hide themselves away, a related and useful skill to be sure, but not so effective to save themselves in the end.